Hi, I'm Bob Weimar. I'm here with school board members and our superintendent to discuss Hampstead School District budget for this year. We'll call it a fireside chat. The intent of this chat is to give you some idea, insights, answers to some key questions that are going to help you as a voter make decisions on March 10th. To provide the insights tonight, I have with me Denise Meyer, board member, Melissa Denton, board member, and of course our illustrious superintendent, Bob Thompson. So let's get right into it. The first question is dealing with the key principles from the district's strategic plan and how they're, if you will, integrated into your operating budgets and plans.
Excellent. Well, first I want to say, Bob, I appreciate the invitation, and I never pass up an opportunity to have a conversation about the budget. And hope to see as many people as possible next Tuesday, March 10th. Get out and vote one way or the other.
Absolutely.
Participate in our local democratic process. So it's a great question because that's really how we approach budgeting when we start. And that process really starts in July. And we start by examining our values. And we have a strategic plan that outlines several core values, things like relationship building, collaboration, integrity, communicating with positive intent. But most importantly, and what drives a lot of the budget process, is honoring the child and making sure that when we construct the budget, what we're doing is we're making decisions that we think are in the best interest of children. We also, even though it's not in the strategic plan, what an important value to us during the budget process is being good stewards of the tax dollar. You know, when I tell people, I have a lot of conversations with people in our community that are on fixed incomes, and we need to make sure that we're honoring those people by making informed decisions about the school budget.
Okay. Well, I think one of the key questions is the performance of our students, right? And if the strategic plan does focus on that as one of its goals, then what do you see as a demonstration that we're meeting that goal at this point?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is in the private sector what we call return on investment, right? And I think it probably is good to start by acknowledging the fact that educating children is an expensive endeavor. You really can't get around that. But it's also an important one. It's probably the most important investment that a community could ever make. And we do have metrics, some which are easily measured and some that are not so easily measured. So the first thing that people usually look at are state test scores, standardized test scores. And I can say we measure ourselves. So first of all, to back up, there was a recent analysis done that says New Hampshire is the 4th highest achieving state for public school in the nation. And so right away, we live in a state that is one of the highest achieving states in all of the United States. What's interesting is we actually fund state funding. We may be 4th by achievement. We're 50th in state funding. So that's kind of an interesting dichotomy. And so we're high achieving state. We live in the highest achieving section of the state, with the exception of Hanover, New Hampshire up north. This is a very high achieving area. And so within our region, we measure ourselves against 13 different school districts, and we consistently are in the top of that analysis. I'll give you, and it varies every year. So this year for math, we are in the top 5 out of the 13 school districts we measure. And if you look at language arts, this year we're around at the 50th percentile level amongst our peers, but you go back last year, we were actually 2nd. So it varies from year to year because every year we have different students. A measure that I'm proud of is when it comes to Pinkerton, Hampstead students represent about 15% of the total Pinkerton population. But if you look at the top 10 students in a graduating class, we consistently will have 3 or 4 of the top 10. There was a few years ago where we had 6. So that just tells you when you compare to the other sending towns, our students are doing very well.
As I say, for SAS, I think it's important when parents opt their students out, how that can affect our outcomes, correct? It counts against us if we have, do you know what the percentage is?
Yeah, so anything over 5%. So yeah, we have a very high rate, particularly at the middle school students that are opting out, and that rate is actually higher than other school districts, so it does have an impact on our scores.
Well, that then would reduce our score compared to others and would make us look as though we're not as, if you will, competent in the education of our students.
And I also think too that there's a component here that is, I would say, sort of beyond measure. And I have anytime I run into a former student who's at Pinkerton, I will always ask, how well did the Hampstead schools prepare you for that experience? And former students and even former parents speak very favorably about the Hampstead experience. It's more than the measurable test scores. It's the culture. It's the culture of the schools. It's the culture of the community that really focuses on meeting individual needs of students. It's a culture where people care about each other. You can't really measure that in a standardized test score, but it's real here in Hampstead.
Well, Denise, you've had folks going through the system. In fact, I think you had someone just start in high school. Right?
I did indeed. And is doing very well and is loving the experience and has been, in some cases, one of the few students in a classroom where they have some of that foundational knowledge that they got from here. So in terms of feeling confident about moving on to that next level, I think it's helped a lot. One other thing I kind of want to call back to, you're talking about test scores. You have to remember these are still children. So it's not like in the business world where you necessarily put the money in and you get the preciseness back out. These are still human beings. So there's a few other things that go into, what happens with the test scores. So for example, the students may be receiving special education. You may have a lower achiever. They're not pulled out of the testing pool. They're taking the test. They are still getting those supports to help them achieve higher, but they're in this scoring today. So you're gonna have a population of children that are scoring well, average, and some below, and that's actually factoring in. Again, it's like the human factor. Some are also poor test takers. So they have severe anxiety over taking exams or are speeding through things, again, human factor. All of those things kind of combine, in my opinion, to the test scores. It's not a direct correlation into dollars out when you have that extreme human factor in there, I feel.
Okay, well, thank you. The town has been very concerned about cost, and certainly the issues that arose last year and the default budget approval made it important that we evaluate how we're going to move forward and to ensure that we're doing the best we can to control costs. But at the same time, we are looking at costs that are among some of the highest in the area per student. So there are a variety of factors that affect that, including the amount of special services we supply and other factors. Perhaps you could give the public some idea as to how we try to control costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a great graphic that is in the deliberative session presentation, and it's online with all of the other budget documents that we have. It's a pie chart, and it shows how we're spending our money. And if you look at fixed costs, these are things that year to year we have very little, if no, control over. Those are things like salaries, benefits. That's health insurance, life insurance, dental. It is utility costs. It is, a big portion of our overall budget is the Pinkerton tuition. We are told what that tuition is. We don't have much or any say on that. And, student services is another area that we have very little control over. New Hampshire retirement. When you add all of these up as a percentage, it's about 90% of our budget really is fixed costs. And so think of it like 90 cents of every dollar that we spend on the school is something that we have very, very little control over.
Well, when you say little control, when you talk about teacher salaries and things like that, those are based on collective bargaining agreements. And is it because they're multi-year agreements that we don't have as much control, or?
Exactly. So, voters have a say. On March 10th, our voters will have a chance to weigh in on the support staff contract. And so it is that vote and that decision that will drive the number for the following year. So we don't go into it being able to make adjustments or corrections to that number. Essentially, it's determined by by the voters. And there is some variation. So for example, the proposed budget, we have 2 less support staff positions in next year's proposed budget, so we're eliminating 2. So there is some variation that occurs in terms of the number of staff that we have, but we require a certain number of classroom teachers and support staff. And so I would consider that a fixed cost because you can't change the nature of the collective bargaining agreement.
The one thing that I think folks have been concerned about too is do we have too many teachers? Do we have too many administrators? And maybe you can comment. I don't know, Denise, do you have some observations to make at all about that?
So I've done some research into class size, and there's a couple different camps on what that means. Some people believe class size doesn't matter. Others feel strongly that it does. I think it's a balance, right? So you're dealing with the individual needs of each whole child in that classroom. So you do have to be very careful and deliberate with your staffing needs. So I don't know if that adequately answers the question, but that's kind of my position on class size.
Well, we're not at the low end, so to speak, of class size. We're in the upper end of the range of class sizes for schools.
It's on a waiver a couple years
We
too.
are. We just approved another one
Yep.
as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Our class sizes next year in 5th grade are going to be 24, 25. Those are not small classes by really any measure, unless we were to compare ourselves to like an urban center like Manchester or Nashua. But outside of that, that's a lot of students in a class. What we have in Hampstead, which is unique, is because I think people generally think we have very small classes. We do in pockets, right? We will have, each grade level will have 4 or 5 classes, depending on the size of the class. We've had ranges from 110 down to 68. That is a huge variation. So if you've got the winning lottery ticket and your kid's class size is 68 kids, there's a good chance you can have a very small class. But if you ended up in that class with 110 kids, so there's variation that is very difficult to control. And so, year to year, you have to adjust your staffing needs. This is particularly true at the middle school, where you have to make adjustments to staff every year. Some years it results. 8th grade's a good example. Our 8th grade tends to have smaller class sizes so that students can meet a requirement for a world language. But, this is a community that values personalization. And I think they recognize it was, a few years ago, we had a very large incoming 4th grade class. We had a number of students coming back to Hampstead from a local charter school. And those classes were pushing 23, which was right at the class size limit. And the original plan was, okay, we're gonna run large 4th grade classes. And the community came out in droves to advocate for an additional teacher because they place value in the smaller class sizes.
Right. Well, the optimum is what, 19 to 20 for above the 3rd grade level, right? Below the 3rd grade level, you might be actually a little lower than that, but.
That's correct, yeah. So we cap out in kindergarten and 1st grade at 18. And anyone who has ever been in a kindergarten classroom with 18 kids knows that that is a good thing that we cap out at 18. That's a lot.
Melissa, you've been through the zero-based budgeting process once. What's your thought about how that works?
I think it's a good process for Hampstead. We are reducing our redundancies, making sure that we're not starting with things we don't need. You're starting from the bottom, having everyone kind of give you what you need to build your budget instead of just assuming you need a certain number.
Okay. I think the other issue that has been, if you will, generally spoken about is the insurance issue. And there's been a lot of commentary about the fact that our insurance seems to be more costly than other options that might be available. I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't say, how are we going to approach that going forward? I realize it's a balance between, trying to meet our needs for the teachers as well as create a cost situation that the town can address.
Say it again. I don't make people
Well,
think.
one of the issues that people have been talking quite a bit about, and there's been a lot of back and forth on Facebook and places, Why are our insurance costs so high? What are we doing to try and manage that?
So I think why they're so high is one question, and what we're trying to do to manage it is a second question.
Okay, good.
I can speak to this year being on the negotiations and doing some of the collective bargaining with the support staff contract that people are going to see on the warrant article. Something that we were able to do was get our insurance cost sharing to 20%.
That's correct.
Which was a negotiation. So as someone would say, to do good collective bargaining, both people are going to kind of walk away not having their needs met, or all their needs, I guess. So that was something we were able to do. As far as why it's so high, I think it goes to the way we do insurance in New Hampshire. And there's only so much that we're able to do, and you have to kind of go through the process. The town votes on it, and now with the teachers, we have to wait 2 more years.
But I also understood that we were offering a $2 an hour rate increase. Maybe you could give us some thoughts about that. Denise, what's your opinion on this whole salary issue?
I would say it's
gonna go to
needed.
what, $20 an hour now?
Yeah, I mean, when you consider what the people are dealing with day in and day out in the classrooms and supporting the needs of the children, I think $2 an hour is, excuse me, kind of a drop in the bucket. I know it affects all of us taxpayers. I'm one of them. But I think it's something that they have definitely earned. I do want to comment a little bit on the collective bargaining. I was not part of that committee. However, you posed a question about what's driving the costs. I think what's driving the costs ultimately is what's driving everything at the macro level. So we have insurance companies that are increasing. I know at my company, the cost went up 38%. Our organization is not covering all of that. So it's shifting some of the premiums down to people, and others are getting some subsidies, but it's different everywhere. I think that is the macro force that is causing a lot of the increase to come across the insurance piece. And we have to be cognizant of that we can control to a certain point. So I think coming to the table and bringing forward the thoughts and comments from the taxpayers, what they are and willing to and not willing to support going forward will certainly help with future discussions.
Yeah, great way to
Because they're hearing it, it's all public, right? So people are getting this feedback one way or the other.
Right, that's an excellent point.
And if I could just comment about the $2 an hour. I have a teenager in my household who just started working for Starbucks about 4 months ago. She makes $22 an hour. She has full benefits, retirement. And with this new collective bargaining agreement, it should have passed, our new employees coming in will make $20 an hour. $20 an hour in New Hampshire is not a livable wage. A livable wage in New Hampshire is $28 an hour. So even at 20, this modest $2 increase, our employees are not able to have their own apartment, own their own home. They either have to rely on a spouse who is the breadwinner in the family, or they have to, in some cases, work 3 jobs. And so paying them $20 an hour to me is less than the market rate for people that are the heart and soul of a school organization. And if you see our support staff, they run our office, they run our offices, they work one-on-one or in small groups with children with disabilities. They are the heart and soul of our school, and to pay them less than we paid the barista working at Starbucks, I think is a little bit of a disservice. But again,
Yep.
Collective bargaining is about where can we mutually agree and come to a point where we think the taxpayers will also go along with it as well. And I think that we really found that sweet spot with the agreement that's on the ballot for next Tuesday.
And I would say don't underestimate the impact of these individuals with the children's lives. So we'll be out to dinner somewhere and we may see someone who serves in the capacity as a parent or something in the classroom. Children go up, hug them, talk to them, like they do make a lasting impact, not
the
just the
community.
educator in the classroom, but these other staff members as well.
No, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. So one of the other issues about budgets, though, is the support we get from the federal and state government. I know at one time the federal government back in the 70s said, well, we're going to give you 40% of the costs associated with special needs services. Clearly, I think they're well under that at this point, if not even at 20%.
12 to 14%.
12 to 15%. Okay, there you go. But the other issue is that we're also seeing with the changes at the federal level and changes even at the state level. the amount of money that's going to be available for education seems to be going down, at least as the federal and state subsidies are going. Maybe one of you can comment on that?
Bob and I have talked a lot about this.
Yeah, we talk a lot about this. And, I think there's unpredictability to what we receive in federal and state funds. And I think there's an added element, and I know we'll likely discuss this later, like there are funds that are pumping into schools or into education, but with EFAs, these educational freedom accounts, they're not coming to public schools, right? So this year there'll be $50 million that are given to individuals that attend private school or a parochial school or homeschool. And I think, what part of the issue is that these are students that have never attended, many of which have never attended public school. So there is money out there. We're just not the beneficiaries of a lot of that. And the number that is the clearest is what we receive in state aid. So the legislature has defined an adequate education for a regular education student being about $4,300 per child. That's what we receive for each of the regular education students that we have, even though the average per pupil cost is $22,000. And we know we're above the average, right? But the average per pupil cost in the state of New Hampshire is $22,000, and the state's portion of that is $4,300. So it just tells you we have a funding issue. We have a revenue issue at the state. And until we get really serious about that, it's going to be local taxpayers. It's going to be property owners. It's going to be our senior citizens that the cost of public education is going to be on their backs. And that is not fair. That is a regressive tax. And until the state comes up with a new formula for funding education, every year it becomes more and more difficult to be able to fund public education in New Hampshire.
I'm going to call something out, and you may or may not want to keep this. You've probably seen the information about how the state is now going back to the Supreme Court to reverse the decision. Is that something you feel the need to comment on at all here in this forum, or leave it be?
See, I think the Claremont decision was like in the mid-90s, and I think I was in college, and I think I was a prospective teacher at the time. And there was all of this hope around the Claremont decision that we were going to solve the funding issue. It didn't get solved, it got worse. And there are such inequities from town to town in public education. So Claremont, there's been several attempts since the Conval lawsuit to address it. And quite honestly, until the state is able to identify a revenue source, the money isn't there, or the money needs to be reprioritized. So we talked about EFAs a little bit, and I'm not opposed to school choice at all. But what I do take issue with is last year there was $50 million in building aid that was divided up against schools that needed to build additions or new schools. We were number 6 on that list, ready to receive building aid. That $50 million, there's a moratorium on it. The money is gone. Well, where's that $50 million? It's in educational freedom accounts now. So, to me, the lawsuits and I'm not that optimistic. I'm really not.
So I think what you're saying, though, is that the public, if they have any interest, they should be applying some pressure on the legislators and
Yes.
the governor.
Reaching out to your legislators.
Recognizing the fact that many of us feel that's a futile process. I do know that the legislators for our town are responsive, and I would hope that they would, make their voices heard.
Can I go back to the funding thing for a second? I think people have to understand too that there's funding for special education in the state and then funding for regular tuition. And I think it's important to differentiate that because the state, when they're doing their formulas, is kind of lacking in rules. And I know they increased, I think if anyone's paying attention, they did increase the special education funding this year, but I don't think it's still sustainable. And you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right. And the issue that we have is it's a reimbursement model. So the district has to spend the money And sometimes that is like knowing the needs of your population of students with disabilities a year in advance, because that's when we do our budget. It's really difficult to determine. Then we actually have to spend the money, and then we have to request funds through a pool, which traditionally has been anywhere between $35 to $50 million, and is prorated based upon the number of districts that put in for reimbursement. It is so wildly variable and unpredictable that it shouldn't come as a surprise that we have school districts in the state of New Hampshire, and Hampstead is not one of them, that become insolvent. You know, all you have to look is some of the sending towns to Pinkerton who, you know, have transportation overages of $600,000, $800,000. So the model is set up of districts have to spend the money, whether you have it or not, and then you can put in for reimbursement, and depending on who else puts in for reimbursement, that will determine how much you get. Now this year we were very fortunate, we got about 90%. It's one of the highest percentages we've ever received, but the year before we received about 60%. And it doesn't even begin to cover the
And that
overall
amount
cost.
didn't change for like 5 years.
Did not change, yeah.
Well, I think that that's a critical factor that we all recognize that the state has yet to deal with. But you have to deal with it every year. So the question is, what kinds of operating budget decisions are you making that has an effect on, you know, the ultimate bottom line? I mean, clearly there must be programmatic differences or other ways you're trying to control the cost.
Yeah, I think every year we have to do more with less. And I think the biggest impact is at the teacher level when it comes to the resources that go into the classroom for teaching and learning. Because again, if 90 cents of every dollar is really kind of a fixed cost, where's that 10%? That 10% is in the supplies that we have in our classroom. It's the textbooks, it's software, it's teacher resources, it's support for students. And so every year our teachers are asked to do more with less. And again, we said our budget process begins in July. And it also begins the day the teachers come back is from summer is when the budgeting process begins. And there are requests that teachers make. They're very mindful of the current state of the budget. And then the principal takes a look at that and makes cuts. And then the principal brings the budget to the CFO and myself, and we make cuts. And then I bring the budget to the board, and the board makes cuts. And then we get public input, and we make more cuts. So every year we are working. There used to be a time where every year we got just a tiny bit more to work with to make us a little bit better than the year before. Now the expectation is we have to be better than the year before because we're committed to continuous improvement, but you've got to do that with less resources. And I think the most glaring example, and we've talked about this a lot, is full day kindergarten. That, you know, we are one of 2 school districts that do not have a full day universal kindergarten. And a lot of that is associated with the cost,
You're talking about throughout the state.
Throughout the state, yep, throughout the state. But there's also other things. You know, our budget, it's not only about the things that are in there, it's about the things that are not. We've talked about the need at the elementary school level for another school counselor. A school of 375 students, it is typical that they would have 2 school counselors. We don't, we have 1. And we, you know, value the well-being of our students. Also a math specialist. We are one of the few elementary schools that doesn't have a math specialist. These are things, if money were not an issue, we would have both of these positions, but we realize that we're in a budget phase where we're not about adding, we're about reallocating because we're not getting those additional resources.
In this upcoming budget, though, I think one of the major glaring items is transportation. Maybe you could, I don't know, Denise or you or Melissa could give us a thought about your experiences or observations.
It's gotten more expensive.
Sure has. Yep.
We'll start again.
Yeah, so transportation costs have increased, I think, especially since COVID. And I think another thing for people to keep in mind is when your household costs are going up, it's also going up for the district, and that includes fuel and transportation. Special ed transportation is especially high, and that's something that we're paying for. And we can't really control the cost of that.
What's causing that?
Bob?
Well, the transportation issue in general is caused by supply and demand. And the sad reality is that while everyone enjoys Amazon Prime and getting those paper towels delivered within 24 hours. uh, Amazon and Uber are employing drivers that otherwise might have become school bus drivers. And even many drivers with a commercial driver's license are, making significant six-figure salaries. So getting people to transport students is very, very difficult. So we're under the pressure of supply and demand. We also have other associated costs. And if you look, specialized transportation, driving students with disabilities to school, whether it's a school here in Hampstead or a school, an out-of-district placement, because we are responsible for our students who we're not able to meet their needs here in Hampstead, we're responsible for those transportation costs. Some of these students have significant medical needs that would require having an LPN or even an RN ride on a bus. They have behavioral issues. They could require a bus monitor. And so really what we're looking at now, there's been this shift. We now spend more money on specialized transportation for students with disabilities, than we do to transport the hundreds of students through our regular ed busing.
That's amazing. Well,
Can I comment on one more thing related to budget
sure,
real quick? Sorry.
absolutely. Go for it.
So one thing I wanted to kind of highlight, Bob, you talked about the cuts in the rolling process, who develops the budget. When it comes to the table, we look at it, teachers pass it on to the principal, comes across to you, comes to the board. One thing that didn't mention was the workshop that's held.
Yeah.
So that's open to the public. There were, I think, 3, maybe 4 people that came this year. Relatively new to the board still, with just under a year under my belt. I didn't realize that was something that we could participate in as a community member. And we did go line by line, item by item, with each individual budget owner to vet all of those things. So I just wanted to be very clear, like that is something the community can participate in and sit side by side and look at everything and ask the rationale behind those things. I just don't think that enough people realize that and the amount of work that goes in leading up to that kind of a workshop.
Right. Well, I think it's very important that we recognize that there are a whole host of issues regarding budget that we probably can't get into today. But it's fair to say that I know as a member of the budget committee, the municipal budget committee, the school department has been very open about discussing budget issues. And I've been very pleased to see the collaboration and cooperation, frankly. So we have a chance to make observations about the budget as well.
Can I make one more point?
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely.
So the things that we can't fund, like the school counselor and the math specialist, if we were to fund those are things that would increase our student outcomes and our test scores, but we can't fund them. And I think that's important for people to realize.
Okay, well, we should probably come to the end of this discussion. It's been very good. I really appreciate the time that you're all spending to educate the public. But maybe there's a couple of elephants in the room. One of them being, Bob, I understand that, well, rumor has it, that you'll be leaving us after 5 years of dedicated service to the Hampstead School District. I don't know if you have any parting thoughts about your experience.
Yeah, I am very confident that I will look back on the totality of my career and look very fondly upon my time here in Hampstead as being probably one of the most meaningful experiences I've had in my career. And if I could only have convinced my wife to leave her job in Hollisbrook Line to come live in Hampstead, I would be here till the end of my career. And there's a reason for that. And I tell people this all the time. I spend 2 hours a day in the car when I could work 5 minutes from my home. Why have I chosen to do that for the last 5 years? Because this community cares about children. They are a community with a lot of heart. I have seen this community experience significant tragedy and loss. And when that happens, people come together. Like, there is something special here in Hampstead that I think a lot of communities have lost. And that is that sense of community, of caring for one another, of caring for children. And I know that whatever future lies in store for me, I cannot imagine finding another community like this. So,
Well, that's very, very nice of you to say. And certainly I think we'll all glow in the accolades, but it's fair to say that we'll be moving on, and I understand we've in fact selected, and I don't know if he's been hired yet, but maybe,
Official at our last meeting.
okay, Melissa and Denise, do you have any comments about the next phase of our leadership?
I got to be on the interview committee for the new superintendent. We had some amazingly talented candidates. I do think though, Dr. Crawford stood out. He has some great experience. He's been in dairy for I think the last 20 years of his career, and I'm pretty excited to see what he's going to bring to Hampstead and what he can do for us.
Yeah, I think overall, I wasn't part of the committee. However, having an opportunity to meet with him, he definitely has the kind of demeanor, expertise, and just fits in great with the culture and what we've brought here as a community. I think he will support all of that, and people should really look forward to it.
Well, he went to
Excited.
Pinkerton. He's a dairy.
He's a dairy
food
resident.
He
right?
Yep.
did. He graduated with me.
Oh, really? Wow.
He did
I've known
indeed.
Joe since first grade. We went to elementary school together.
Well, there you go.
And he
He still respects you. 'cause
he's,
he worked
well,
all along.
yeah, but he's always been, I remember him as being just a great kid, a great human being. And again, going back to Hampstead having heart, the Joe Crawford I know has a lot of heart too. I think he's going to do extremely well.
Well, I've been impressed the few opportunities I've had to speak with him, so I'm looking forward to seeing him succeed here, just as you have. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you very much for what you've done to start the district on its path. You were the first, and certainly will never be forgotten.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Bob.
So, any last thoughts?
Just hope everyone's going to come out and vote.
All right.
Yeah, I was
Sounds
just
like a
gonna
great
say,
idea.
make the time. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it in the end.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I will not be here on voting day, but I did vote already. So
No, great. I'm
recommending that everyone should vote. Well, thank you very much. It's been
Thank
an interesting 40 minutes, a lot longer than we expected, but that's good. And I appreciate your candor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you.